February 1942. A cold rain hammered the steel deck of U-boat U-559 as it sliced through the black waters of the Atlantic, 200 miles west of the Irish coast. Below deck, the radio operator hunched over his Enigma machine, fingers dancing across the keyboard with practiced confidence. Each letter he typed illuminated briefly before transforming into something else entirely, a mathematical ghost, scrambled through 3 spinning rotors and a plug board into incomprehensible ciphertext. He transmitted the encrypted message into the darkness, certain of one absolute truth: no enemy could ever break this code. The machine's creator had calculated the odds, 150 million possible settings. It was, by every measure of German engineering and mathematics, perfect, unbreakable, eternal. The Enigma machine was not merely a tool of war. It was the embodiment of German technological supremacy, a mechanical manifestation of the Third Reich's belief in its own intellectual dominance. When Arthur Scherbius first patented the device in 1918, he envisioned it as a commercial product for banks and businesses. But the German military saw something far more valuable, a way to communicate with absolute impunity. By the time war erupted across Europe in 1939, Enigma had evolved into something extraordinary. The standard Wehrmacht version employed 3 rotors selected from a set of 5, each rotor containing 26 electrical contacts. A plug board at the front allowed operators to swap letter pairs, adding another layer of complexity. With each keystroke, the rightmost rotor advanced 1 position, and through a carefully designed mechanical system, the other rotors advanced at irregular intervals. The result was a cipher that never repeated the same encryption pattern until all 17,576 possible rotor positions had been exhausted. And that was before considering the daily key settings, rotor selections, ring positions, plug board connections, that changed every 24 hours across the entire German military network. German cryptographers had done the mathematics. They had calculated every probability, examined every theoretical vulnerability, and concluded with absolute certainty that even if the enemy captured an Enigma machine intact, breaking the daily keys would require testing millions of settings, a task that would take months with the computing power available in the 1940s. By the time any single day's messages were decrypted, they would be operationally worthless, ancient history in the rapid pace of modern warfare. The Kriegsmarine added even more security to their naval Enigma machines, implementing 4 rotors instead of 3, multiplying the possible combinations into numbers that seemed to mock human comprehension. When U-boat commanders transmitted their positions, their targets, their fuel status into the Atlantic darkness, they did so with the serene confidence of men speaking a language only angels could understand. But in a modest estate 40 miles north of London, in the peculiar Victorian mansion called Bletchley Park, men and women were already reading those angel whispers, and they had been reading them with increasing regularity and speed since early 1940. The breaking of Enigma was not a single moment of triumph. It was not one brilliant mind cracking one unbreakable code. It was instead a long accumulation of captured materials, mathematical innovations, mechanical engineering, and thousands upon thousands of hours of meticulous analysis by people the world would not know existed until decades after the war ended. The story began not with Americans, but with Polish mathematicians who had been studying Enigma since 1932, years before most of the world understood the machine's significance. Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rojicki, and Henryk Zygalski worked in secret for Polish military intelligence, and by 1938 they had constructed replica Enigma machines and developed mathematical methods to determine daily key settings. When Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, Polish intelligence smuggled their research to British and French allies. a final gift from a dying nation to those who would continue the fight. The British established their code-breaking operation at Bletchley Park, recruiting mathematicians, linguists, chess champions, and crossword puzzle experts, anyone whose mind worked in patterns and possibilities. Alan Turing arrived at Bletchley in September 1939, and within months he and Gordon Welchman had designed an electromechanical device called the bomb, based on Polish innovations but far more powerful. The bomb was not a computer in any modern sense. It was a collection of rotating drums that simulated Enigma rotors, testing thousands of possible settings in hours rather than months, searching for logical contradictions in the cipher text that would reveal the correct daily key. By March 1940, the first bommy became operational. By the end of 1940, Bletchley Park was reading some German Air Force and Army Enigma traffic with increasing regularity. But the German naval Enigma remained impenetrable. The addition of that fourth rotor, the more stringent security procedures of U-boat crews, and the carefully guarded key lists meant that Allied ships continued to sail into wolf packs of submarines they could not detect, could not anticipate, could not avoid. In 1941, the Atlantic became a graveyard. German U-boats sank over 1,200 Allied merchant ships that year. More than 4 million tons of shipping sent to the bottom along with the food, fuel, and weapons Britain desperately needed to survive. The Enigma messages flowed constantly through the Atlantic ether, U-boats reporting positions and convoy sightings. But Bletchley Park could do nothing but record the indecipherable transmissions and file them away like prayers in an unknown tongue. Then came the captures. In May 1941, the British destroyer HMS Bulldog forced German submarine U-110 to the surface and captured the vessel before its crew could destroy the Enigma machine and codebooks aboard. In October 1942, British sailors boarded the sinking U-5IY-9 in the Mediterranean. Two men, Lieutenant Tony Fasson and able seaman Colin Grazier, climbed into the flooding submarine and retrieved codebooks and Enigma materials even as the vessel was going down. Both men drowned when U-559 made its final plunge, but the materials they rescued proved invaluable. These captures, along with several others throughout 1941 and 1942, provided Bletchley Park with actual keys, actual settings, actual encrypted messages paired with their decrypted plaintext. This was the cribs, the known plaintext, that the bombs needed to work backward through the cipher. By December 1942, Bletchley Park was reading German naval Enigma regularly, though with delays of sometimes days or weeks. But regular access was not enough. The Battle of the Atlantic was reaching its crisis point. U-boats were hunting in coordinated wolf packs, and Britain was slowly starving. Every day of delay in decrypting U-boat positions meant more ships sunk, more sailors dead, more supplies lost. The code-breaking operation needed to become faster, more efficient, more industrial in scale. It needed resources that Britain, exhausted and besieged, could barely provide. America had been watching British code-breaking efforts since early 1941, months before Pearl Harbor forced the United States into the war. American cryptographers had been breaking Japanese diplomatic codes with their Purple Machine since 1940, demonstrating formidable capability in their own right. But the relationship between British and American intelligence was delicate, fraught with mutual suspicion, and neither side willing to reveal all their secrets. That changed after December 7, 1941. Within weeks of America's entry into the war, detailed exchanges of cryptographic intelligence began in earnest. British cryptographers shared Enigma secrets with their American counterparts. American engineers examined the bomb designs and began considering how their nation's industrial capacity might amplify the code-breaking effort. What the American cryptographers and engineers saw was a puzzle that could be solved not just through mathematical elegance, but through raw productive power. The same industrial abundance that was already beginning to reshape the entire war effort. Britain had approximately 50 bombs operating by 1943, each one a massive machine standing 7 feet tall, weighing more than a ton, containing miles of wire and over 100 rotating drums. Each bomb could test approximately 20,000 Enigma settings per hour. But the 4-rotor naval Enigma required testing exponentially more possibilities. The British bombs could break Army and Air Force Enigma traffic efficiently, but naval Enigma often took too long, and in the Atlantic, time measured in hours meant the difference between convoy routes safely plotted and ships blown apart by torpedoes in the night. The United States Navy established its own code-breaking operation, expanding on the work begun before the war. By mid-1942, American engineers were designing their own version of the bomb, one that would be faster, more reliable, and compatible with the industrial production methods that American factories had perfected. The U.S. Navy contracted with National Cash Register Company in Dayton, Ohio, a factory that knew precision manufacturing, that understood how to build complex machines in quantity, that could transform a British prototype into an American production model. By April 1943, the first American bomb became operational. It was faster than the British version, capable of testing Enigma settings at unprecedented speed. And crucially, National Cash Register could build them in numbers the British could never match. German U-boat commanders continued to transmit their positions, their sighting reports, their tactical formations with complete confidence. They rotated their Enigma key settings every day at midnight precisely, following procedures designed by the most paranoid security minds in German naval intelligence. They used code words within their already encrypted messages, adding additional layers of obfuscation. They changed rotor selections, plug board settings, message formats, and none of it mattered. By the summer of 1943, American bombs were arriving at the Naval Communications Annex in Washington, D.C., and at other secret locations, setting up alongside British bombs in an industrial-scale assault on German naval communications. What had once taken days to decrypt now took hours. What had once been impossible now became routine. The German expectation was simple. Enigma was unbreakable because the mathematics said so. The machine's complexity created a fortress of probability that no enemy could storm. Even if somehow, impossibly, the Allies had broken the code, they would surely reveal that capability through obvious reactions. Ships avoiding every U-boat patrol, convoys altering course at the last possible moment, defenses appearing exactly where German attacks were planned. German intelligence officers watched for such patterns constantly. They saw nothing suspicious. Convoys were still sunk, though perhaps not as many as before. German submarines were still surprised by Allied escorts, but that was the nature of war. Unpredictable, chaotic, fundamentally uncertain. Naval intelligence attributed Allied successes to improved radar, better aircraft patrols, increased destroyer escorts. These explanations made sense. These explanations fit the world as German commanders understood it. But the reality was something far more profound and far more terrible for the Kriegsmarine. By mid-1943, Allied intelligence was reading approximately 3,000 German messages per day. Not eventually, not after weeks of analysis, but daily, sometimes within hours of transmission sometimes, when the daily keys were broken especially quickly, within minutes. The operational intelligence this provided was almost godlike in its completeness. Allied command knew where German U-boats were sailing, what orders they had received, what tactics they were planning, what supplies they needed, which boats were damaged and limping home. The wolf packs that had terrorized the Atlantic were being hunted themselves, and they never understood why. The Allies were careful, almost painfully careful, to disguise their intelligence source. When an Enigma decrypt revealed a U-boat's position, Allied command did not immediately dispatch destroyers to that exact location. Instead, they sent reconnaissance aircraft along plausible search patterns, and only after the aircraft discovered the submarine did surface ships move in for the attack. Sometimes, even when they knew precisely where a U-boat lurked, they allowed it to pass unmolested because attacking would reveal impossible foreknowledge. Sometimes, tragically, convoys that could have been saved were left to their fate because saving them would compromise the secret. The intelligence value of Enigma decrypts was so extraordinary that Allied command accepted losses they could have prevented rather than risk letting Germany discover the code was broken. The Americans brought to this effort something beyond merely more bombs and faster processing. They brought an industrial philosophy fundamentally different from European approaches. Where British Bletchley Park was organized like a university department, brilliant individuals working in huts, sharing insights across disciplinary boundaries, solving problems through creative collaboration. The American operation was organized like a factory. Procedures were standardized. Shift work was implemented on a massive scale. Machine maintenance was scheduled with automotive precision. The National Cash Register factory in Dayton eventually produced 121 American bombs, each one faster and more reliable than its British counterpart. These machines ran 24 hours a day in rotating shifts, processing Enigma intercepts with industrial efficiency. The cryptographic breakthrough that Polish mathematicians had initiated, that British mathematicians had refined, became in American hands an industrial process, mass production applied to code breaking. And the intelligence kept flowing. Every U-boat transmission intercepted, decrypted, translated, analyzed, and distributed to operational commanders. Every repositioning order, every convoy sighting report, every fuel status update. By late 1943, German submarines began dying in unprecedented numbers. In May 1943 alone, the Kriegsmarine lost 41 U-boats, a catastrophic rate that forced Admiral Karl Dönitz to temporarily withdraw his submarines from the North Atlantic. The crews that remained reported increasingly effective Allied attacks, escorts appearing as if, guided by supernatural knowledge, aircraft arriving at impossible moments. Some U-boat crews began to whisper about betrayal, about spies within the German command. They could not conceive of the truth, that every message they transmitted was being read by the enemy, that the cipher machine they trusted with their lives had been defeated not through treachery, but through mathematics, engineering, and relentless industrial effort. The symbolic object of this betrayal was not weapon or food, but the Enigma machine itself, that beautiful mechanism of rotors and wiring that sat in every U-boat radio room, that clattered away in every Wehrmacht headquarters, that represented the apex of German technological confidence. It was small enough to carry, elegant in its mechanical simplicity, and absolutely trustworthy. Or so they believed. The machine became a symbol of something deeper than mere cryptography. It represented the German faith in their own superior engineering, their conviction that mathematical certainty could defeat human ingenuity, their belief that complexity itself was a form of security. They had created a perfect machine, and they assumed that perfection made them invulnerable. But the Americans and British had demonstrated a different principle entirely. Complexity could be defeated not through equal complexity, but through abundance. Abundance of machines, abundance of personnel, abundance of industrial capacity, abundance of patient analysis. Where Germany had created one perfect cipher machine, the Allies built hundreds of imperfect code-breaking machines and refined them through iteration and mass production. Where German security relied on mathematical certainty, Allied intelligence succeeded through systematic probability, testing millions of possibilities until the correct answer emerged. Where German commanders expected their codes to remain unbroken until the heat death of the universe, Allied cryptographers broke them fresh every morning before breakfast. The war turned in 1943. The Battle of the Atlantic shifted decisively in favor of the Allies. Historians would later estimate that the breaking of Enigma shortened the war by 2 to 4 years, saving countless lives on all sides. But German commanders who survived the war would spend decades wondering what had gone wrong, how their supposedly impregnable cipher had failed them. The truth remained classified until the mid-1970s, when former U-boat commanders finally learned that their messages had been read throughout the war. Many refused to believe it. Some died still believing Enigma had never been broken, that their losses resulted from radar, from sonar, from random misfortune, from anything except the possibility that their perfect machine had been imperfect after all. The American contribution to breaking Enigma has often been overlooked in popular histories that focus on British achievements at Bletchley Park. Alan Turing rightfully receives recognition as a genius whose work laid foundations for modern computing. The Polish mathematicians who started the effort deserve acknowledgement as the true pioneers. But the industrial-scale American effort, the 121 bombs running in shifts, the thousands of personnel processing intercepts, the systematic application of mass production techniques to cryptographic analysis, this was the force that transformed Enigma from a partially broken code into a completely transparent communication system. This was American abundance applied to intellectual warfare, and it proved as decisive as the abundance of ships, aircraft, and tanks that eventually overwhelmed the Axis powers on every front. For 3 years, from early 1941 until the German surrender in May 1945, the Allies read German Enigma traffic with increasing completeness. 3 years of German commanders transmitting orders they believed were secure. 3 years of U-boat crews reporting their positions in a cipher they thought was unbreakable. 3 years of operational plans, tactical movements, supply requisitions, damage reports, all encrypted with meticulous care and all decrypted with industrial efficiency. The Germans never knew. They died believing in the machine, trusting in the mathematics, confident that German engineering had created something beyond Allied capability to defeat. The full scope of the intelligence victory would not be revealed until long after the war ended. When the British government finally acknowledged the Bletchley Park operation in the 1970s, former German officers reacted with shock and disbelief. Some expressed grudging admiration for the achievement. Others felt betrayed not by spies or traitors, but by the machine itself. That elegant device they had carried into battle, that symbol of technological superiority that had promised absolute security and delivered instead complete transparency to their enemies. There is a particular tragedy in the German faith in Enigma. The machine was good, the cipher was strong. Under most circumstances, without the captures of codebooks, without the industrial-scale bomb operation, without the massive Allied intelligence effort, Enigma might well have remained secure throughout the war. German cryptographers were not fools. Their mathematical analysis was sound. What they failed to anticipate was not a brilliant individual breaking their cipher through pure genius, but an entire industrial system dedicated to breaking it through exhaustive systematic effort. They built a lock that no single lockpick could open, and the Allies responded by building a factory that manufactured thousands of lockpicks and tested them all simultaneously until one worked. Then they did it again the next day, and the next, and the next, for 3 years. The Enigma machine still exists in museums, its rotors frozen in arbitrary positions, its plug board empty of cables, its keyboard silent. Visitors examine it with curiosity, perhaps pressing a key to see the illuminated letter that appears, marveling at the mechanical ingenuity required to create such a device in an era before electronic computers. But the machine itself was never the weakness. The weakness was the faith placed in it, the assumption that mathematical complexity equals practical security, the belief that perfection can be engineered rather than earned through constant adaptation. The German military clung to Enigma throughout the war, making incremental improvements but never fundamentally questioning whether the core system remained secure. They trusted the mathematics. They trusted the machine. They trusted German engineering supremacy. And that trust killed them. In the end, what defeated the Enigma cipher was not superior intelligence, but superior abundance. The same principle that allowed American factories to produce more aircraft, more ships, more tanks than the Axis powers could destroy, also allowed American and British cryptographers to produce more code-breaking attempts, more analytical hours, more systematic attacks on the cipher than German security could withstand. It was democracy's advantage weaponized, the ability to mobilize entire societies, to recruit talent from every social class, to apply industrial methods to intellectual problems, to persist with overwhelming resources until the seemingly impossible became routine. The Enigma machine promised its operators absolute security, the mathematical certainty that their words would remain secret. But in the Atlantic darkness, in the Mediterranean sun, in every theater where German forces operated, those words were being read by the enemy, translated, analyzed, and turned into weapons more powerful than any torpedo or bomb. The messages flowed constantly, and the Allies read them all. The Germans believed their cipher was unbreakable. They were wrong, and by the time they discovered their mistake, the war was already lost.